Given what you experienced growing up as a child and wanting to fit in and always feeling like a quote unquote other, how did that inform how you parent and what you talk to your kids about when it comes to race?
Look, I mean, I think that empathy is can be taught. Empathy can be learned. And given everything that has happened in the last year and a half, and I don't just mean, the Asian hate. I mean, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. My kids know every one of their names. It's been really important. My kids are only 8 and 5, but they know about Japanese internment. They know about the Chinese Exclusion Act. They know what Jim Crow laws are. They know who Rosa Parks was. They know who Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X were. They know about Dolores Huerta. I mean, for me, it's been so important to try and give them, in a gentle way, right, a sense of history and a sense of, what communities have contributed to this country outside of what they learn about in school and in their history books. And I think, Jamil, if I had had a more diverse sense of history growing up, I think I would have felt like I belonged a little bit more. I think I would have had um, a greater appreciation and empathy for the things that so many people have dealt with. My experience growing up, and dealing with some adversity, I think has really helped me in the work that I do. But I think we can all do better as parents with our kids, and again, educate them in a gentle way about standing up for people and standing up for justice and what's right. And that's the thing that does give me hope, which is that right now we're having these conversations. I mean, it's shocking to me that there's such a ferocious debate about history in government, in school districts, in legislatures, in homes. To me, if we don't know our history, we can't really know ourselves, and we can't know how to move forward.
And we can't develop that empathy that you were talking about. And like you, I think it's very dangerous that in several pockets across America, there's this push about critical race theory, which is really just masking people wanting to completely, kind of erase history, erase people of color, erase marginalized people, so that they don't have to deal with what is always been a prevalent issue in this country: racism, misogyny, xenophobia, all these other things. And they don't understand how much more dangerous that is for people of color when they are purposely coming for our community. So I'm wondering, you said you were trying to teach your kids in a delicate way. Is there a delicate way? And as a parent, was there a part of you that was really worried about shattering their innocence?
So there are these incredible books now that are available to kids that I wish I had when I was growing up. I use the word gentle because my kids they're very timid, they
Mhm.
get scared very easily. But at the same time, um, I think that they can really appreciate, when I would read stories about Rosa Parks and why it was important for her to stand up for herself, because she wasn't just standing up for herself, she was standing up for her community, and so I think there's a way to teach young kids. I mean, again, my kids are very young, they're 8 and 5, but I think there's a way to teach them in a way that doesn't scare them. Like, for example, with the Asian hate that's been happening, I have not shared with them the brutality of what's been happening to Asian people, just that Asian people have been on the receiving end of discrimination because they're being, people are blaming Asian people for the virus getting rooted here. And, my daughters will say things like, well, we're Asian. We had nothing to do with the virus. And I'll say, well, that's the point. That's the point. And so I don't talk too much about like the real sort of egregious levels of violence, but more of a sort of overview on the fact that discrimination and judging people based on the color of their skin or their background is just fundamentally wrong.
I think for a long time, there's always been, the Asian community has always faced a high level of racism, some of which have led to physical attacks. But obviously, in the last 2 years, there's been an explosion of it. During that time where you have witnessed this explosion, How did you personally process what was happening?
Well, it's been devastating. There were moments, because look, we're all connected on social media, and so I think by now we've all seen some of those horrific videos of Asian people, particularly our elderly, getting just brazenly attacked. And after the Atlanta massage parlor shootings, there were weeks when it was all I could think about. I was distracted from being able to work. I was distracted from being able to be a good parent. Like, it affected so much of my 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 mind space. Fortunately, I have become quite friendly with a number of Asian Americans who have been asked to do a lot of media around this. And we've kind of become each other's sounding board in so many ways. And the reason why that's been important for me is I've realized that I'm not alone in this. I think for so much of my life, because I grew up as one of the only Asians in my community, I felt very alone. And I never wanted to bring up race. I never wanted to talk about my Asianness because, again, it would just, again, exacerbate those feelings of not belonging and being different. But when we all talk about the things that we've experienced, it feels good to be able to have a community, to be able to fight these battles together. And on top of that, to also be working alongside people from outside of the Asian community. People are Black, white, brown, who are supportive of what's been happening. Because the reality is that the scapegoating of other people has been something that has happened throughout our country's history. And right now it's Asian people, but tomorrow it could be another community.
Mm. Um, there was, I noticed on social media as these attacks were happening, there seemed to be, and I don't want to give it too much credit, but there seemed to be a push to kind of combat or pit our communities against one another, especially once President Biden, there was the bill passed that specifically addressed anti Asian hate, and there of course were a number of people who said, "Well, wait, what about us?" As in Black people, given what
Yeah.
had happened to George Floyd, we know where the George Floyd Policing Act stands now, which is it doesn't, and so there was this pitting against our communities. And from your perspective, how did you feel like in that moment? Our communities kind of responded to one another. Like, did you feel like the Black community was supportive enough in terms of, denigrating the hate, but not just denigrating the hate, because I mean, that's kind of basic, but just providing support to another marginalized community that had been attacked?
I this is the thing that has really been challenging. The tensions that have existed in between the Asian and the Black communities. And I think one of the things that is important to just think about is that um, the Asian community is so diverse and so vast, and it's comprised of so many different people with distinctive languages and distinctive cultures. And your experience with a particular community um, is unique to that community. And the thing that made me really sad is that I think we all are kind of lumping all of the issues that may exist into one bucket. There are complex issues in the Asian community. The model minority characterization of Asian people certainly doesn't help, and it was something that was specifically created to drive a wedge between the Asian community and other communities of color. And I hope that people can just, look at this as a human issue, that people shouldn't be scapegoated and brazenly attacked when what we're dealing with is something that we've had nothing to do with, and again, because our history isn't taught in schools, it's hard to have a frame of reference for the contributions that Asian Americans have played. And I think that even many Asians ourselves are waking up to this history. But I got to tell you, um, after George Floyd was so brutally killed, after Breonna Taylor was so brutally killed, Ahmaud Arbery, I mean, every Asian person in my world was out there protesting and speaking out. And so that's why it makes me really, on a personal level, that discord continues to exist, because I didn't grow up in the in Koreatown, right? And so my frame of reference for the tensions that existed there are very different. And so that's the thing that I hope people recognize, that that a lot of the tensions are, they come from different communities and different generations. But this new generation, I like to think that we're all on the same page, and we recognize that we're stronger together, and that our fight is really against the same structures, and we can fight them more effectively if we ally together.